I'm going to start by being a little bit off script, but one of the, unexpected pleasures which I found is in being engaged in cancer research and in the cancer system is that you often come across people who take the worst thing which has happened in their lives and the worst thing they can imagine, and they turn it into something which is absolutely amazing, positive, and which can help a lot of other people. And it truly is a beautiful thing to see. And our special guest speaker today is such a person. And so we're really exciting to have Golda Arthur with us today. Golda, she's an award-winning audio producer and journalist. She's connects deeply with her listeners, and we're going to get to experience this firsthand. She's worked with CBC, BBC. She's run podcasts at Fox Media and MIT Technology Review. She hosts and creates Overlooked, an award-winning podcast on women's health and ovarian cancer. And she teaches audio reporting at Columbia University and is based in New York City, which is why we're really lucky to have her here. So today she's going to be sharing her experiences on how to create a podcast from a science-based story, how producers think about translating science into sound, and how to be a great podcast guest. And that's really good for all of us, because some of us have probably been very bad podcast guests for you, and so we can all learn from this. And when it's your turn on the mic. She's also pulled back the curtain for a behind-the-scenes view on how our award-looking Overlooked podcast about ovarian cancer was created and produced. And so we're really happy to have you here to join us, to thank you, to tell you how much you've inspired us face-to-face, and to learn from you as well. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for that introduction, Dr. Huntsman. I guess that is what I did. Took a very upsetting event, and I made something from it. So hello, and we're going to talk about how to create a podcast from a science-based story. I'm Golda, and I'm a journalist and a podcast producer, and they are two separate things, and I happen to be both. I've been in audio for about 25 years now. I started out at the CBC in Nova Scotia. I moved on to the BBC in London, and then about 10 years ago, I moved to New York City, and I worked for NPR and Vox Media. For the last few years, I've been running my own production company. So I've been in the news business. I've made, business and economy shows, technology podcasts. I've done my 10,000 hours in audio at this point. I didn't set out to create audio stories about science. And I didn't set out to make a podcast about cancer. I set out to tell a story about my mom. In 2018, my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer. Actually, her initial diagnosis was prostate cancer, and then after more tests, was confirmed to be ovarian cancer. And actually, at the time, we were told it was stage 3, and actually it was stage 4. And, I knew so little back then, I had to Google it. How many stages of cancer are there? And when I found out, of course, I immediately wished I didn't know. And then it was confirmed, stage 4 ovarian cancer. So what I did there was I told you a little story, a little micro story. It had a clear arc. It had a beginning and a middle and an end, a rising action, climax, falling action. You guys learned all this in 5th grade English, right? It's a narrative arc. Nothing has changed in the way that we tell stories. We've been doing it since the dawn of time, scrawling on the walls of caves. As humans, we have a long tradition of oral storytelling. And in oral storytelling for the ear, not the eye, we generally follow a linear structure. When you're reading a story, if you read a line you don't understand, you get a chance to read it again. But in oral storytelling, you only get one shot. You get to tell the story once, and that's why things tend to be linear. We can absolutely repeat things because that's how we learn. That's, we're saying they're important because we want to memorize them. But for the most part, we move in a straight line when we tell each other stories and when we hear stories being told. So that's the narrative arc. And I knew for sure that I had a narrative arc. When the cancer recurred the first time, I got pretty distressed. But the journalist in me was saying, this fits into the story somehow. When the cancer came back a second time, when mom took a drug that we hoped would help her, but actually almost killed her, when she did a genetics test and found she had a mutation called RAD51C, I knew there was a story, there was an arc, there was something driving it. When I did a genetics test and discovered that I had the same mutation, again, I was feeling all the feels in real time, but that pesky voice in the back of my head was saying, story, story, story. When I was lying in a hospital bed in December, 6 months ago, having a bilateral, what's it called? When you have your ovaries? Thank you, and that is what we call audience engagement in my business. So when I was lying in a hospital bed after my BSO, I knew story, story, story. And this time I was part of the story. As a daughter, through all these years, I wanted to be an ostrich, dig a hole and stick my head in it. I didn't want science. I didn't want story. I didn't want cancer from my mom. But as a journalist, thinking as objectively as I could, the story of one woman surviving a recurring ovarian cancer was really quite a compelling one in an emotional and an intellectual way. My challenge was, as an audio journalist, could I understand and explain the complex ideas underpinning this story in a way that was understandable to everyone, to a general audience? And as a daughter, could I bear to do any of this? My mom and I had many conversations, and it was important to both of us that this story get told so that other women who were diagnosed could know about the cancer, about the journey, and could know that they were not alone. So I made a show, and it's called Overlooked, and it launched last fall. So let me see if you guys are still awake. Has anyone heard Overlooked or heard of Overlooked? Hooray, okay. Please go and listen. Okay, so Overlooked told this whole story, and it has won a couple of awards, I'm pleased to say. But it's the emails that I get from women, some women with cancer, some without, some of them daughters like me, from listeners in general who write to tell me the relief they had at not feeling that they were alone. This is the real prize for me. Okay, so here's the thing. I am coming at this the opposite way from how you guys are coming at this. I was sitting on a damn good personal story, so good I didn't even want to tell it, and I had to dig deep and understand the science behind the story. The science that was driving the biology, the innovation, the treatment, the science that was shaping my mom's disease. Science, science, science. I felt pretty stupid not understanding any of it, and so I asked a lot of questions. You guys have the science at your fingertips, and in order to make this come to life for an audience, you're casting around for a story. So how do you create a science podcast, just in case any of you are thinking of it? I would say, find the human behind the science, find the story behind the human, connect science, story, and sound, et voila, science podcast. Easy. Not so easy. I'm going to break it down for you even more by talking about how Overlooked was made and how audio producers like myself think about science. And we're going to show, not tell, so this is going to be quite interactive. I hope you'll find it useful, not just if you are creating a science podcast, but if you are taking any bit of your research and taking it out into the world for a general audience. But before we do any of that, I want to introduce you to my mom. So today, mom was in chemo in Nova Scotia, but I think she has joined us via Zoom, and I wasn't sure how she was going to be feeling, so I got her to send a little, Almira, send a little video, which I don't know how to get because Almira's going to save me here. So this is the video from my mom.
I'm Teresa Arthur, mother of Golda, my award-winning daughter. I'll say that for her in case she hasn't mentioned it to you yet. She discovered my audio diaries that I had started recording when I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer 6 years ago. I was always into journaling and writing poems, but focusing with a paper and pen began to have its challenges as the chemo treatments carried on. And then I discovered sound. It was just so easy to manage as I carried my phone along on walks, or recorded my fears on a sleepless night, or spoke about something interesting I'd been reading, or just a message to myself. Golda heard some of these and turned these sound bites into a podcast, and the ripples just widened into this massive message, reaching out to ears that were there to capture it. The cancer began to have some meaning for me and my family. For me, especially as I have been a science person from high school through university to teaching chemistry in high school, I could delve into the world of cancer almost with a detached curiosity and record my growing knowledge of this disease. Golda used this as a reaching out mission, and we're still learning so much from various medical professionals, researchers, initiators of programs, and the very important people who live this story, the patients. I'm sure you all also have a backstory that got you all here, as well as a present narrative about what you're delving into today, discovering along the way. And you will have future announcements as you will communicate your exciting research and discoveries, translating all this into hope, recording your journey through the exciting world of prevention, cure, maybe wellness, and even eradication someday. That's hope with a capital H, and the world needs to hear it from you. Good luck, and thank you.
Thank you, Mom. So my mom and I have this joke. Before she retired, my mom was a high school chemistry teacher, and she said that the girls in her class, she taught at a girls' school, who were liberal arts majors required a separate type of explanation. So every time in these 5 years, she would tell me, well, this is what's going on, this is the chemo, blah, blah. I would say, explain it to me like I'm a liberal arts major, Mom. So that's what she does. She explains it to me like I'm a liberal arts major. Okay, so those audio diaries are an example of how I am a sound hunter. I go around looking for sounds that tell a story. And sound is incredibly evocative. It can be extremely visual if you have the imagination for it. I'm gonna just switch to another, oh, what am I doing? So sorry, Almira. I think have I lost the tabs? Oh, there we go, okay. Okay, so let me give you an example. Chemotherapy. What does chemotherapy sound like? Does anyone want to try and mimic the sound of chemotherapy? Or tell me what you associate it with? Let's hear it.
This is the soundtrack of chemotherapy.
Okay, I think that's it. This entire prize for you. This entire episode had that sound coming in as a chorus throughout, and certainly I hear that sound in my sleep sometimes. But that's where I started it, that's where I ended it. It is 3 seconds of sound, but it immediately puts you in a place, right? To see that machine, to understand what's going on, to understand that these chemicals are saving a life, in a way. Okay, so you know what? I think I got it for the next one. Thank you. All right, so staying on the chemo beat, the challenge is how to take something complex and make it accessible, understandable for a wider audience. So how do we do that? We find the sound, certainly if you're making something in audio. And then number two, we break it down, right? We don't take it as just one tangled mess of science. We break it down. For example, throughout those 5 years, I was hearing these words: carboplatin, paclitaxel, and calyx. My eyes would glaze over. Even though I'd heard these words all those 5 years, I didn't understand what each of these chemicals were. I didn't understand the nature of these chemicals. I didn't understand what they did in the body, and I did not understand the difference between them. So I asked my mom's oncologist, Dr. Lana Sachirich in Nova Scotia, when I interviewed her, to make me understand them. And I said, well, what if they were characters in a story? What kind of characters would they be? And this is what she told me.
A really simple way, starting with carboplatin.
So carboplatin is a medication that is used quite a bit in a lot of gynecologic cancers and quite a lot of other cancers as well. So carboplatin is like the quiet guy who does his work, who doesn't bother anybody, really, who doesn't make you lose your hair. They're just like a hard worker. Definitely can have some side effects. When that quiet worker has had enough, they're going to explode. But for the most part, they stick to themselves. So basically, carboplatin, the side effects are things like being a bit tired, having maybe a bit of low appetite. We watch blood counts really closely, so they can go low, but usually tend to be okay. Can give a bit of nausea, but doesn't make you throw up a lot. So all things that can be really controlled. And it's a medication or a drug that we give to people, even if they have a lot of other health issues, if they're not very well, if they're very frail. Usually most people can do okay with it. So that's carboplatin.
And then paclitaxel.
Paclitaxel is very different. Paclitaxel is the bald punk, just not a nice person by any means. So paclitaxel makes you lose your hair. Paclitaxel gives you bony and muscle aches. It can give you an allergic reaction. It can cause numbness and tingling, neuropathy. Again, it can also lower blood counts, cause an infection, that kind of thing. So that's paclitaxel.
You won't believe the number of people who wrote in to me to say, bald punk, I get it. And this was, again, for me, a revelation to hear these chemicals described in these ways. I suddenly understood something I didn't before. She gave me an image that I still hold on to. Okay, when I'm interviewing people of science, I'm always trying to understand two things. What is the underlying science itself? I have to understand it fully before I can explain it to my listeners. And then, what is the impact on the body? And they really go hand in hand, and I find that sometimes the people I'm interviewing do really well with explaining the science, but forget to answer the question, so what? How does this show up in the body? Listeners, especially a general audience, always want to know not just what the science is, but what it means. And this makes sense, right? If I start talking to you about inflation, you don't really care about inflation. You care if your salary is also going to go up with inflation. You care if your rent and the price of bananas is going to go up with your salary. So this idea of what does it mean to me is a thing that people are actually always, I think, hunting for. So we find the sound, we break it down. And I think the third thing is you don't have to dumb it down, but you do have to start where the audience is and raise them up to the level of complexity that you are working in. You don't have to oversimplify, but you do have to be understood. In audio especially, it's good to take a listener by the hand and lead them through an explanation in a linear way. I'm not going to play the third clip of, am I going to play? Yeah, I think I could squeeze it in. I have a third clip where we talk about PARP inhibitors, which was another thing I was like, what? I don't know. And this was so important that it was a matter of life and death. So I thought I should take a minute to try and understand them. And I talked to a woman called Dr. Tracy Brooks at Binghamton University, and I'll just play a little snippet of how she explained to me what was going on here.
So in this room, this is where we actually grow the cancer cells and then work our way to kill the cancer cells as well.
I'm in a lab in Binghamton University in upstate New York, and I'm here to meet Dr. Tracy Brooks, an associate professor of pharmaceutical sciences.
So we do a lot of 3D modeling of the cancer cells as well. And we try and examine, is there a difference with how the chemo works in 2D versus 3D? What does the tumor kind of look like so we can test drugs?
Professor Brooks's grandmother had ovarian and pancreatic cancer. Her mother had endometrial cancer. Her husband, testicular cancer.
My reason for getting into cancer research in the first place has a lot of family history, like it does for most people who get into this area.
On a computer screen in her lab, Professor Brooks and I are watching a model of how cancer cells move and grow.
So you can see the cells are kind of like moving along little blobs, and that's what a 3D culture would look like. But these cells are actually really interesting. If you watch them over time, they actually find a place, they sit down, and they start expanding, and they'll start filling the space.
Oh my God.
And they, even if you zoomed in, which I can do in a second, they look like little neurons. They have little kind of growths outside of them.
Dr. Brooks went on at length about these cells. She was so excited about them. And it's very imperceptible, I think, but to get people of science excited about science and record that on a microphone is really great, because you guys do get excited about it. And that passion for what you do, I think, comes across so clearly. So as a journalist, I'm always sort of poking around. It's like, what really gets this person out of bed in the morning? And Dr. Tracy Brooks was like, just, having me like stare at this computer screen where there was a model of these cells, which he was very excited about. Okay, so I want to say three last things, and these are like very practical tips for you guys if you happen to be on a podcast talking about your work or something like that. And then we're going to do an interactive exercise, okay? So the three practical tips. On a podcast, you're often being recorded. So if you hear yourself saying something you don't like, just stop dead. Tell the host you're going to take it again and start over clean, because on a recorded podcast, these things are often edited out. It's always good practice to have a conversation with the host or the producer beforehand as well. Number two, if you get nervous on a microphone or talking to people, you're not alone. Here's what I do when I get nervous, and I get nervous every single time. I visualize all the nerves in my tummy as butterflies, and I exhale the butterflies. So I'm breathing out butterflies, you guys. So whatever works for you guys, think about it and get the nerves out of your voice. And I think you'll have a better time being interviewed in that case. Breathing helps clear the mind and center the soul, and is good for living. Lastly, if you're trying to communicate your work and you're not sure how you're coming across, practice. Practice talking about it to a variety of people. Practice it talking to Nana at dinner. Practice with your 8-year-old nephew. Practice it on a first date. I'm not promising it'll go anywhere, but practice it on a first date. And observe what happens next. Where do people's eyes glaze over? Where did they light up? Or where do their ears perk up? What lights you up when you talk about your work? Can you say what you do in 15 seconds to somebody who's not a scientist? Can you say why it's important to the world in 30 seconds to somebody who's not a scientist? Practice, practice, practice. And if you can do all of these things, then good for you, you're ready for prime time. So what I wanted to do now was to do a little interviewing exercise. I would love to have somebody come up here. We're going to have one mic for you, one mic for me. We're going to do like a 4-minute interview to practice. This is a safe space. And if I don't get any volunteers, I'll pick someone. So who wants to be interviewed by me? You get to tell me what your name is, and then you get to tell me what you do and help me understand it, because I'm a liberal arts major and I need all the help I can get. Can you hear me on this microphone? Yes, you can. Yes! Come on up. Come on up. That's what I do. That's what I do when I teach. I do this thing where I make sure I pick an introvert. Are you an introvert?
I'm like 50-50.
Okay, I'm a high functioning introvert. So there we go. So we're both kind of 50-50, right?
Perfect.
Okay, so we're going to do a podcast. You guys are going to be a really supportive live audience, right? So hello and welcome to the podcast. So say your name for me.
I'm Abby.
Abby, what's
Shore.
your last name?
Shore, like seashore.
Okay. Hi, Abby Shore. What do you do?
I am in ovarian cancer research, and I'm looking at the effect of the IUD on ovarian cancer risk.
Oh my God. So you're looking at the effects of the IUD on ovarian cancer risk. Why this bit of ovarian cancer? What is it that draws you here?
Well, I'm interested in contraception.
So you're gonna just hold that mic closer to your mouth. There you go.
I'm interested in contraception and
Mhm.
contraception choices.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm working with Dr. Jillian Hanley, who's over there, and she does ovarian cancer research. So it was an interesting way to kind of put those two things together.
What's the most challenging? You guys, can I hear it for Alvia? She's fantastic, right? Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm sorry. Go on. Tell me.
Sorry, what was the question again?
Fair. What was it that draws you to this bit of research?
Oh, okay, wait, we went over that question. What was the next question you're asking? What's difficult about the research?
Right, yeah,
Okay. I think research in general can have a lot of difficulties. Like, I think it always takes longer than you think it's going to take. I think we kind of started doing one analysis and it didn't work out the way we wanted it to, so we had to do something else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest part of research. It changes and sometimes it goes slowly.
Let me go back to something that you said. You started doing one analysis
Mhm.
and then it didn't really work out. Tell me that story. What happened?
So we wanted to do a more simple analysis,
Mhm.
but since we're looking at IUD use, that is over a period of time. And not everyone that we're looking at is going to have the IUD for the same amount of time.
Mhm.
So they're all starting at different times, and we wanted to be able to compare these people in a way that made sense, even though they're not all starting at like one day in 1 year. So then we had to start looking at a different analysis, and as you can imagine, it would be more complicated because we have all these different time periods, and
Right.
we want to compare them to people who don't have an IUD at all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how do you, what is a personal challenge for you in this, in the work that you do?
I think something that I've talked to other people about, and that I think a lot of people experience, is like imposter syndrome in grad school.
Oh yeah, tell me more.
So I think like feeling like you're like the only person there who like doesn't really know what they're doing.
Okay.
I think that can be really real, and that's definitely something that like I've experienced in grad school.
And what do you do when you start to feel this? How do you cope with it?
I guess like talk to friends or like talk to people who know me really well, who can be like, no, like you know what you're doing, like you're there for a reason, it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you think about that and you think, I'm here for a reason,
Mhm.
what is the thing that comes to mind that keeps you doing the work that you do?
I think at the beginning I was just interested in science. But I think as I've gotten more into the ovarian cancer field, I've definitely been really, it feels important to be able to find things that can prevent ovarian cancer, since it is such a horrible disease. And I think that's really driven me more as I've like moved more into the field.
Yeah. Awesome. Can we have a round of applause? Some for you. There you go, some podcast merch. Who wants the next tote bag? Yes, come on down. Come on down. Okay, tell me, extrovert or introvert?
So
There's a story.
my voice is loud. You can hear it without microphone?
Use the microphone anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go. So just place it about this much away from your chin. Okay.
Sure, Golda.
Okay. So tell me your name.
Okay, my name is Amal Al-Naggar and I am a research associate.
Come with me.
Oh,
So we can be on the camera, right?
Oh,
So come
okay,
on, come on in. Okay, all right, Amal.
okay. My name is Amal Naggar. I'm a research associate working with Dr. David Hansman.
Fantastic. So tell me, what is it about the work that you do that is easiest to explain to people who don't know anything about the work?
Okay, the easiest thing about my work, it's hard.
That's great. That's great. That's great. What is the hardest thing to explain?
The hardest thing to explain, of course, it is not easy. So, and in between these two,
Yeah.
hard and easy, there is a complete journey. So, for anyone, people can see just the two ends.
Yes.
You're doing cancer research, something seems straightforward,
Yeah.
okay? But
Yeah.
what is happening from first step till end? Do you see treatment in the market to help people?
Yeah.
What is the magnificent
process.
effort and the process behind this? People usually jump to question how this will help patients, but they don't know there is years. It doesn't come in moment or even months or year. It needs years of effort, continuous effort to get to the point that yes, we have something with benefit patient. And I
Yeah.
think many people sometimes found this hard because they need just
Quick answers,
Yes.
yeah. And, you know, the fact that this is a lifetime's work sometimes is generational work
Yes,
sometimes,
exactly.
right? So what do you think the public perception is of ovarian cancer research then? Because you're saying there's a gap, right?
Yes.
There's a gap between the work that you do and what people think is happening.
Yes.
So describe that gap for me more fully.
Okay, I think to summarize, we can envision this process in two major steps. Basic science behind the final, basically, which is the treatment. And you have clinical trials where people start to hear, oh, we have now this drug. For example, in clinical trials, it makes like good results, and so on. I think of course, every stage is important, but I think the basic science role in this a bit, I don't want to say underappreciated, but because I think we need to get more to people to increase awareness. What is the importance of basic science? And basic science is basically is the root, is the reason why you see treatment eventually like in the market for this. When it comes to funding, for example, funding is a major challenge, especially for rare cancers, because usually most funding like go to common cancers because they, for example, will benefit lots of patients.
Yeah.
But if you look at rare cancers are very interesting because they share similar characteristics. Despite they are so many different rare cancers.
Right.
If you collect these rare cancers together, they will basically big portion.
Yeah.
Of this.
But we don't see it that way. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think this is something I really hope one day.
Yeah, and you obviously feel very.
Jim Patterson, ground floor, cardiac ICU. Code white, Jim Patterson, ground floor, cardiac ICU. Code white, Jim Patterson, ground floor, cardiac ICU.
Got it. Code white, ground floor, Patterson ICU. Repetition, very important in audio.
Yes.
That's never happened to me in the middle of an audio interview before. Fabulous. Okay, let's have you closing thoughts.
Okay. Closing thoughts.
Yes. In 3 sentences. Let's make it, this is easy for you. Let's make it harder.
This is
Yeah,
very
let's make it harder. Yeah.
Okay. Cancer researchers are doing fantastic job. They are dedicating their time, effort, and sometimes at the expense of very important things in their life, including their family.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
For a noble goal, which is to help the general population. So I hope just people will be patient a little bit because it takes time to get to this point. And I hope just our voice will reach to everyone and everyone will get equal opportunity for good treatment.
Yeah. It's fantastic. I hope so too.
Thank
Let's
you.
have a round of
Thank
applause.
you.
Amal, I think you're a natural. So I never thought I'd say this on a microphone. We're overrepresented for women down here. Yeah, I know, I said it out loud. So is there a dude out there who wants to try? No. No dudes. All right. I won't drag you down here if you really don't want to do it, you guys. Where? Seriously? Oh my God, hooray! Yay for men. Okay, very good. Why was that hard? Hi there. All right, let's be on the screen here. Hi, what's your name?
Rodrigo.
Hi, Rodrigo. What do you do?
I do ovarian cancer research.
Tell me a little bit about what type of ovarian cancer research you do.
I study one rare type of ovarian cancer, low-grade serous.
Mhm.
In particular, I look into the cells that are within the tumor that are not the tumor itself. The purpose of doing that is just to see what they're doing and what we can tackle. So it's kind of avoiding the chemotherapy and see if there's other routes of treatment we can exploit. The way that I heard somebody once explain it to me was it's like Angry Birds. Where the tumor cells are the pigs and the other cells that we're looking into are the scaffolding.
Oh my God, that's
So
a great analogy.
rather than targeting the pigs, we can target the scaffolding.
Yeah.
And by targeting the scaffolding, we maximize the amount of pigs we kill.
Yeah. Who hasn't played Angry Birds here? Can I see a show of hands? So take that one more time, Rodrigo. And for the folks who've never played Angry Birds, translate for them what you just said. Don't say it science-y. Say it like, use that same analogy, but describe it differently.
So instead of targeting the tumor cells or targeting the bad actors, we might want to target the environment in which they exist in. And by targeting that environment in which they exist or modifying it, we may be better able to, I don't know.
Yeah, you're cheating here because you guys, you're all speaking the same language.
Yeah.
Okay, but you see what I mean? It's like sometimes, even a gaming analogy is something that people don't get. So tell me what drew you to this work?
I was very interested in science in general. I was like always been a huge nerd. So I know my lab mates sometimes make fun of me because I spend my free time just reading papers. And I like to I get a lot of recommendations on my email and my Google News, just articles. Yeah. And I joined David's lab because my roommate wasn't there. He told me David was a really great guy, really talkative. And there seems to be a lot of opportunity to do cool work in his lab. Yeah.
Awesome, very good. Is there anything you want to mention as a closing thought that I haven't asked that you can say in like 60 seconds?
I don't know. I'm very, appreciative of working in BC Cancer. I think there's a really cool environment to be interacting with super smart people, having really in-depth conversations about like literature or like research, and just constantly being engaged in new ideas, or sometimes just talking randomly about some science or some new result, or just speculating about weird things that we've seen in literature, weird things that we just see sometimes during the day-to-day. Yeah. And I'm very happy that David is always willing to engage in those kinds of discussions.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you, Rodrigo. Let's hear it for Rodrigo.
All right. Thanks so much. Maybe, Golda, I'll just open it up one last, if you have any calls to action, any final words before we thank you and end the day.
No, in fact, I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you on behalf of me and my mom and my whole family. Thank you for everything that you guys are doing. It is so important. And I wish you the best of luck with it. So, thank you.